What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the third person and action RPG tutorial series, we're going to be going over NPC interactions part 2, or just NPCs part 3. So in this episode what we want to do is when we interact with an NPC, we're going to have a little camera effect to focus on that NPC, and this camera is going to be fully customizable for every NPC, so you can change where the camera is going to be at for each character. Although it will have a default value, so it's not required that you make it unique for each character. And then when we exit interaction with them, we go back to our regular camera for our character, and we can control them again like normal. Before we get into this episode, if you're interested in catching up in the series, the entire third-person action RPG tutorial, where you can see how we did things like collisions, damaging enemies, and things like that, I'll link you to this playlist right here in the top right corner so you can check out every episode we've done. If you only care about NPCs, I do recommend you watch the first 2 episodes of NPCs, since this is going to be building on top of that logic. So I'll link you to the first episode of NPCs right here. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing almost everything in the code today. Let's go into Visual Studio. Now in Visual Studio, the first place we want to go is to our NPC class. For me, that's base NPC, so I'm going to go to base NPC.h. In here, I want to scroll down to the 2 functions that we created in the previous NPC interaction episode. Those are enter interaction and exit interaction. So previously, we were calling enter interaction when the character was close enough or within range of the NPC and they pressed the interact button. And if they pressed the interact button again while already interacting with that NPC, they would exit their interaction with the NPC. Before, though, we didn't have any parameters here. Now we're going to pass in an instigator, which is going to be of type character. So any character can interact with the NPC. You could also make this your custom character class. That would work too. This is a little bit more expanded if you did want to include other characters. Regardless, though, this instigator is going to be used to determine what character is interacting with them. And the reason that is important is because if we have multiple characters, we may not want to enter that interaction for every single character that we have. So think of it in a multiplayer game, even local multiplayer. If one of the characters that's being controlled interacts with the NPC, we don't necessarily want the other character being controlled by another player to also interact with that NPC. That instigator will allow us to understand who is interacting with this NPC and then do the corresponding logic for them specifically. So in both enter interaction and exit interaction, I'm adding this new parameter of a character pointer instigator. So make sure you add that to both those functions. And then we're also going to want to add a camera. This camera is going to be what we transition the character or the player's camera to. That way we can focus on the NPC. Now to do this, we're going to make a camera component, very similar to the camera component that we have on our character class. At the end of the day, it's just a regular camera component, so anything we can do in a normal camera, we can do here. So as you can see here, I say this is the basic camera for the NPC. You may want to have multiple cameras for the NPC for whatever number of reasons, but by default, we should have one. The U property here, visible anywhere, blueprint read only, category equals camera, and meta equals allow private access equals true. So we're going to want to be able to see this in our NPC class and in other classes as well. We don't want to be able to edit it in those other classes, so visible anywhere is fine. Blueprint read only. Saying we can't set it in the blueprint and things like that, we can just access its value. That's perfectly fine too, because we're just going to be changing the position of it in the blueprint. The category is just so that we can find it more easily. I have category of camera because this is actually from the character class. They put it in the category of camera. I like that category, but I do want to put it in quotes because I think that looks neater. And this meta allows you access to a few other tags and different U property fields. In this case, we're going to set allow private access to be true because we're going to make this camera component private. So you can see above these lines, I've added this private colon here. So if I want to access this in another class, I would need a getter to do so. It's not super important right now if you don't know what that means. We've gone over it a few times throughout the different series, such as with the is interacting boolean here. But it might still be a little fuzzy, so don't worry too much. We're going to be going over it a lot more as we use it. Anyway, to actually make the variable now, we can use class, uCameraComponent pointer, and call it character camera, or whatever you want. It could be called basic camera. Doesn't really matter, just as long as you know what it is. When you try and do this, you're going to get an error, and that's because the camera component class does require an include. So if we scroll up to the top of base npc.h, you can say I've added a new include here. Pound include camera/camera component.h. Make sure you put that above your .generated.h include, otherwise it will not compile. Now let's go into the base npc.cpp, and in here we're going to go to our constructor, and I've added a new section here above setting the variables where I say create components, and this is where we want to actually create the sub-object or the camera component, and then we're also going to attach that to the capsule component, which is our root element of our NPC, and really of all character classes. First thing we're going to do is create the camera component, and you can do so by calling create default sub-object. So this is going to create a component. We need to give it a class because you can create all types of components this way. We want to create that uCamera component class, create default sub-object, angled brackets, uCamera component. Then we have to give it a name that we want to actually show up as when we're in the blueprint, so the name of the component. A lot of the time this will be the same name as your variable, so you could call it character camera, but in this case I'm actually calling it something different just to kind of show off that you can do that. So I'm calling it basic camera. My variable is character camera, but in the blueprint it's going to show up as basic camera. To make it the proper type for the default sub-object, we need to put that string inside of parentheses and wrap it with this text macro. So there we go. Now this created object, as long as it was created properly, it will go into this character camera variable. Then we want to attach the camera that we created to our root component, so if the NPC moves, the camera will move with them. So character camera, arrow, setup attachment is the next function we're calling. Then we have to determine what to attach to. Again, I'm attaching to our root component, which is our capsule component, and I can find that by typing get root component parentheses. This will just get the root component of the class. It happens to be our capsule component, but it would be whatever the root component of that class was. So after this, the character camera that we're calling basic camera will show up in the blueprint as this component has now been added to our actor. Now we're going to scroll down to enter interaction and exit interaction, and in here we want to make sure we update our function calls to have that a character pointer instigator in both of them. So the end goal here is to really call set view target with blend on our camera, because set view target with blend will essentially lurk between the two cameras. We're going to take our camera, our character's camera, and move over to the location and rotation of the NPC's camera, their viewing camera that we have. Take a look at what we have here. We're daisy chaining a lot of things together, which just basically means we're doing a lot of things in one line. So let's break this apart. The first thing we have is our instigator. Our instigator is possessed by a controller. That controller is what can actually call set view target with blend, so that's what we need to access. So first of all, we can check if our instigator is valid. It is a pointer, so we do want it to be valid before using it. So if instigator would be our first if statement. We also want to see if we can get a valid controller from the instigator, and if we can, if it can be cast to the A player controller type. A player controller is the one that has set view target with blend, not just a regular controller. So for this we can make a variable. Let's make it auto instigator controller. We're going to set it equal to cast A player controller, because this is the type we're trying to get. And the object we're going to cast is going to be the instigator get controller. So if we can get a controller from the instigator, we will try and cast it to the A player controller class, and when we do that, it will be put into this variable. Now if it's valid, we will go inside this if statement. So then we can call instigator controller set view target with blend. The first parameter here is the new view target, and we want to view this because we're in the NPC class. Instigator is the character that interacted with this NPC, and they want to be viewing the NPC class. This is the new view target, which if a camera component is present and active, that camera will be chosen by default. We don't even have to specify that there's a camera there. And then we need to express a duration. So for now, we can choose any value we want. I chose 1 second, so 1.0 F stands for 1.0 float, and really it's 1 second. Now that I've separated like this, if it's a little bit simpler, you can remove this other line if you already added it. You don't need it. They do the same thing. This one is a little bit safer because we have if checks to make sure these things are valid, so I'm going to leave it like this. Additionally, you could change auto if you want to be a player controller pointer. These are the same thing. There's a few other things to do with it, but I usually just leave it as auto when I'm just using it for if statements and casts. Now we want to do the same thing in the exit interaction, so should make a lot of sense now. So if instigator, trying to make sure that our instigator is valid, and if they are, we're going to check and see if we can get the controller from the instigator. And we need to cast the controller to a player controller so that we can call set view target with blend on them. This time, however, the target of the view, or the new view target, is not the NPC. We're trying to return back to the character. The instigator is the character that's exiting the interaction, so they're the character that we want to go back to. That's the camera we want to possess, whatever their default or active camera is on there. So instead, I'm actually going to pass in instigator instead of this. Then we can choose a time, which I'm just going to put to 1.0 for, again, 1 second. And there we go. There's enter and exit interaction. Now we got to go back to wherever we called enter interaction and exit interaction. So for me, that's in my third person tutorial character.cpp. And I have to scroll down to my interact function. In here, we were determining if the NPC was interacting. Then we were calling NPC exit interaction. And if they weren't interacting, we were calling NPC enter interaction. We have to pass in this for each of these. This refers to the class or this object that we're in. So specifically, the third-person tutorial character that's interacting should be the instigator of this NPC when entering and exiting that interaction. So update those two function calls, and once you've done that, we can go back into the editor. Alright, with the editor back open, we have to go to our NPC blueprint. So I'm going to go to Blueprints, NPCs, NPC Paladin BP. Now, we don't have anything in the graph in here, so you might get this view right here. We can still get to that by clicking Open Full Blueprint Editor. We want to do this so that we can get to the viewport, this tab right here, and we can see our NPC. In here, you should have your camera component. Again, it's character camera as the variable, but you'll see that I named it basic camera, so that's what's in parentheses. Regardless, though, it says camera component at the end. That's what we want. This camera is now going to be the active camera by default, so when we call set new view target with blend and pass in this NPC, this is the camera that's going to be used. So when you come in here, you're going to have location rotations of all 0 with a scale of 1.0 for everything. I've updated mine to these settings right here because that's where I thought looked good for the NPC. You can change them to your liking. So if I make this 500 instead of 270. So now when I come in and I interact with them, it's going to rotate the interaction to look this way. That's not really what I want in this case, but if you did want that, that's perfectly fine. So you have full control over your location and rotation of your character camera. Now, for whatever reason you don't want to have cameras on all your NPCs, you actually don't need one. You could force it by moving your own camera, the character's camera, or by spawning in a camera. You have a lot of different options, so it's up to you. You might have to play around with it, but this is one method of interaction and nice little transitions with our cameras that we can use in our game. Plenty more to come, though, in the NPC interaction episode, so if you're interested, please subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and that is completely free. If you're also interested in getting these templates for free once they're up on the marketplace, feel free to check out that Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriber link. And I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all the kind souls that already have supported the channel and helped kept me going this long, so thank you all so much. If you ran into any problems with this episode or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. But anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.